Well, hello, welcome back as we look into the Grand Canyon controversy between Walt Brown and another geologist. And there was an organization that's being discussed here, and they have new leadership. And I am pretty excited about that because they actually invited Walt Brown or some hydroplate people in to present to their the ICR. They invited hydroplate people to come in to talk to their scientists, which is a huge, huge step forward. The guy in charge says, I want my scientists to know what theories are out there. And he also said that this is to fix an injustice. So there are people that know about this and they know that it's wrong and they're doing what they can to fix it. And so hopefully more people will have that same feeling. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look through a summary that Jane Albright put together. And the way you can find that, let's see, I'll add this to the stage and put me down here. And then you're going to go in here and go into calvarypo.org. And then it's got a search thing on the left, and you type in Grand Canyon Summary. And you're going to get this, summary and chronology. So you can click on that, and then you're going to get the summary. And not only that, you get the chronology, the timeline that I just read, just got done reading. So you can get the chronology of the events here also. And these are downloadable. But let's go back up to the summary. Okay, here it is. And this is Walt Brown's. He writes about he puts it in his own words, a controversy. Oh, what a tangled web. When we first practiced to deceive. This is Walt Brown's writings from either the 8th or 9th edition. I'm not quite sure, but you can read that for yourself and hear what Walt Brown had to say about the situation. Well, let's just go up to this summary. Okay, let's move this up. Summary, let's expand it maybe. Okay, good. Make it easier for you guys to read and for me to see. Okay. This is by Jane Albright, and she did an interview on the Hydroplate Week of Celebration. So if you want to hear what she has to say about talking to all these people, she did an excellent work. You can see that on the channel, on the YouTube channel, if you search Albright. Okay, the Grand Canyon controversy, 30 years of plagiarism and slander within the creation science community. The record clearly shows that between 1989 and 1992, Dr. Steve Austin, a geologist then working for ICR, plagiarized key discoveries of Dr. Walt Brown pertaining to the breached dam formation of the Grand Canyon. When people noted the similarities, Austin responded by accusing Brown of plagiarizing his work. Austin's slander quickly spread and began to threaten not only Brown's work, but the work and reputation of other professionals who supported his theory. As a result, Brown approached Austin and ICR in 1993 to resolve the matter privately. When this failed, Brown proposed and ICR initially agreed to Christian binding arbitration to resolve this dispute. At the last minute, however, ICR backed out of their agreement, stating they would participate in only non-binding Christian mediation. Brown reluctantly agreed. At the conclusion of the mediation session held in June 21st, 1994, the panel found in favor of Brown, but Austin and ICR subsequently failed to honor the terms of the agreement. Since then, they and others have added to their slander by spreading the lie that Brown threatened to sue ICR. The lies continue to this day, and Austin continues to use some of Brown's discoveries without attribution, causing much confusion and hindering access to the only explanation for the formation of the Grand Canyon that provides a scientific explanation and answers key problems. Background. In the late 1980s, Steve Austin, at the time employed by ICR, was supposing, his word, that the Grand Canyon was a post-flood related marvel created by a large lake that breached a dam. He mused about this possibility in ICR's 1988 version of Austin's Grand Canyon Field Guide. He also mentioned several problems that must be overcome by any explanation, but proposes no solutions, answers, or evidence. During 1986 to 87, Dr. Walt Brown devoted 1 full year of researching the formation of the Grand Canyon. He discovered unique features of the surrounding high country that led to his theory that the Grand Canyon was formed when a massive, now extinct lake at 5,700 feet breached its dam at the Marble Canyon Funnel. Brown named this lake Grand Lake. He began describing his discoveries in lectures, presentations, and radio interviews in 1988. In 1989, Brown published his theory in the 5th edition of In the Beginning, Compelling Evidence for Creation and the Flood, ITB, including data and elevation, name, location, and breach point of Grand Lake. He was the first to lecture on and publish these specific data, along with dozens of pieces of field experience in support of his explanation. Before long, people were telling Brown that Austin was saying Brown had plagiarized Austin's breach dam theory. At first, Brown ignored the rumors. However, the slander continued to spread, and was threatening the ministry efforts of a friend. As a result, Brown followed our Lord's instruction, Matthew 18, and in 1993 approached Austin and ICR privately. He requested that they stop the deception and correct the record. Austin and ICR rebuffed Brown's attempt to settle the matter privately. Instead, Austin falsely claimed priority because of his field guide supposedly copyrighted in 1988, which he sent to Brown. Under a comparison with his own copy of Austin's 1988 field guide, Brown noted that the booklet Austin sent him had been modified to insert a map of a large lake, which Austin had captioned Ancient Lake, which breached its dam to form Grand Canyon. Attachment 1. Let's take a look. Other discrepancies were made. Okay, let's take a look at his drawing. Let's see, figure 1. All right, that's what he says. And he says, a computer was asked to draw the shoreline of the lake, which would form behind the Kaibab upwarp if the Grand Canyon were blocked at the 5,700-foot elevation. The lake would form as shown. It would contain the water of 3 Great Lakes. This computer-generated lake approximated the outline of the ancient lake, which breached its dam to form Grand Canyon. Okay, so that's inserted into the 1989 booklet, I believe. All right. Other discrepancies. It is obvious that the map had been quickly inserted prior to the publication of the 1989 field guide, which was then falsely labeled with a 1988 copyright. Further, after reading Brown's newly published In the Beginning, 5th edition in 1989, Austin added other details from In the Beginning to his 1990 field guide without attribution, including the name Grand Lake, which Austin later admitted he took from Brown. He used this lake name for 3 years before changing to Canyonlands Lake when he published his own book prior to mediation. Following the instruction of Matthew 18 and 1 Corinthians 6, Brown then proposed binding arbitration with Christian arbitrators as an alternative to making the entire story publicly available. After initially agreeing in writing to binding arbitration, Austin and ICR President Henry Morris II backed out at the last minute. Upon the counsel of their attorneys, they stated they would participate only in non-binding mediation. Reluctantly, Brown agreed to mediation. In 1994, the mediation panel of 3 Christian attorneys and 1 retired federal judge reviewed the facts of the debate and found for Brown. The lead mediator, Peter Robinson, associate director and assistant professor of law at Pepperdine University, wrote in September 21st, 1994 letter to Austin that Austin was to stop using the name Canyonlands Lake when referring to the Grand Lake explanation for the formation of the Grand Canyon. Instead, Austin was directed to use Grand Lake, the name given by Brown as a symbol of his commitment to reconcile with Brown and to acknowledge Dr. Brown's contributions regarding this body of water. Their findings instructed Austin/ICR to insert an errata sheet into the remaining stock of his book, The Grand Canyon, Monument to Catastrophe, to correct the record. Not only did Austin and Morris fail to insert the errata sheet into the existing stock, but they also failed to make the correction in the next printing and have continued to use Canyonlands Lake to this day. Had Austin and ICR complied with the original ruling, Austin's plagiarism and slander would have been exposed. Since the mediation was non-binding, Brown had no recourse. Soon another malicious lie was circulating that Brown had threatened to sue ICR. Prominent members of the creation science community continue to spread this lie to this day. Attached is a chronology of the key events in the sad story of 2022. Conclusion. The facts above are documented beyond dispute. All documentation is available on Real Science Radio, radio's well-trafficked website. Okay, kgov.com/ICR Steve Austin plagiarized Walt Brown to see proof of fraud. And also at kgov/Lee's Austin Brown mediation on Grand Lake, and kgov.com Lee's Austin Brown mediation executive summary. These facts are also laid out in the published 8th edition of Brown's In the Beginning, note 39 to the Grand Canyon chapter, and is a planned 2-page side note in the soon-to-be-published 9th edition, draft attached at attachment 3. Yeah, when was this written? Conclusion. When did she write this? December of 2025. Well, this is brand new. Yeah, because that 9th edition's been expected to be printed for 5 years. Okay, so this is brand new. Good deal. And this is in mid-December right now as we're making this, December 19th, I believe. Okay, conclusion. Okay, as Christians, we know that the truth always prevails, and the plagiarism, lies, and slander perpetrated by Austin and his colleagues and the organizations they are associated with, including ICR, will eventually become part of the historical record. ICR can correct these wrongdoings and salvage its reputation with a simple letter that will set the record straight. This will also send a clear message to the creation science community, the church at large, and the world that ICR is willing to stand for truth and is committed to the integrity that God requires of his followers, even at a cost. Yeah, a simple letter. Yeah, a simple letter to shine light on this, ask forgiveness and move on. That's all we want. Let's just stop blackballing Walt Brown and his work. This theory should be looked at. Okay, get off the side. Okay, this is the excerpt that we looked at. This is from Steve Austin. There's Hopi Lake and there's Grand Lake. What does he call them? He doesn't say either one. Interesting. What else is on here? Okay. And let's see. What is this? This must be, oh yeah, this is from Austin's book. So we read this part already. What else did he put in there? Limestone cliffs, whatever. Okay. If such cliffs are the result of a continuous slow erosion over hundreds of thousands of years, we might expect a progressive increase in the decomposition of talus on the benches away from the cliffs. Such boulder aging has not been demonstrated. Instead, we see shale benches which appear to have been swept clean of larger rocks by the large flooding. Then after significant flood modification, a recent talus has been accumulated. Yeah, who is reading this? This must be Austin's. When I favored the antecedent river and precarious gully theories, I had the problem of explaining where the products of 70 million years of river erosion went. I could not find appropriate erosion or depositional features to the west or east of the Grand Canyon, which would have been produced by the long continued action of the primeval Colorado River. And I knew that such incessant river action would erode and deposit 1 million cubic miles of material. Wow. With the catastrophic draining theory, there is no requirement for the Colorado River to erode for tens of millions of years because the river only needed to be thousands of years old. The lack of features which would be produced by an old river is an argument for a young river. The vast erosion off of plateaus could be produced by sheet flowing when the flood water retreated off the plateaus. It would have removed the sediment far above the plateaus. We would expect no stream deposits adjacent to the plateau. Then after the Kaibab upwarp occurred, impounded water behind the plateau was released by a catastrophic breaching and draining Grand Canyon, and the establishment of the Colorado River through the northern Arizona would be very recent geological features. This explanation why the products of the Colorado River erosion and sediments are confined to near surface sedimentary layers. Conclusion. There will need to be more investigation of how the Grand Canyon was eroded. The notion that Colorado River carved the canyon, as the antecedent river theory assumes over millions of years, is untenable and now recognized so by most geologists. The concept of Grand Canyon erosion from stream captivation by enlargement of a gully allows an accident of incredible improbability. The explanation of recent erosion of the canyon in association with catastrophic drainage from the Great Flood seems to integrate and coordinate a great number of facts in believable fashion. I found that the statements of Scripture provide an acceptable framework for interpreting the erosion of Grand Canyon. So that's the footnote. Okay, this is an excerpt from the 8th edition, and this is Walt Brown. I'll go slow so you can screenshot. Okay. Yeah, we might as well read this. You get an understanding of it. Yeah, it was like learning about the Grand Canyon. So this is from the 8th edition, copyright 2015. I don't think that's right. I think it's a 2009 edition. I can check right now. Let's see here. I'll look into my 8th edition right here. Let's just give you a break now. Just a quick break. Okay, we're going to remove this. We're going to take a look at, this is the 8th edition. And the 8th edition has a copyright of, let's see here. Where's that copyright? Should be in here. Yeah. Yeah, 8th edition, 2008. I don't know if you can see that or not. 8th edition is 2008. The 9th edition is 2019, but it still isn't in print in 2025. So that's where that's at right now. Okay, so let's read what Walt Brown had to say in the 8th edition. Let's see, where am I? I'm going to make myself smaller, make that bigger, so you can still hear me. Okay, Fountains of the Great Deep. Okay, Barb Canyon to the northwest later during a trip into Ryder Canyon, the fault, and much more were found. Between Ryder Canyon and Marble Canyon, it's what I will call a peninsula. If you look closely at figure 119, you will see that it narrows or necks down along the solid white line. Along that line are many sinkholes and long depressions. They show the subsurface water drained below the line and removed considerable material as if the line marked a nearly vertical fault. Okay, a plane of weakness, slippage, and drainage. The drainage would have spilled out over the white line segment, intersected Marble and Ryder Canyons, undercutting and removing material, thereby narrowing, necking the peninsula. Also, a vertical crack, several hundred feet, have dramatically opened along the edge of Ryder Canyon. See figure 140. Some large blocks have fallen or are about to fall into Ryder Canyon. The tension that split open the formed Marble Canyon no doubt produced these parallel cracks. If block faulting produced the 2,000-foot Echo Vermilion cliff system as the Colorado Plateau was hydraulically lifted, why was the fault offset as seen at the Colorado River, only about 100 vertical feet and not 2,000 feet? Answer, as Grand Canyon's lakes breaching removed mass south of the funnel, the south side of the fault steadily rose and arched upward, reducing the original offset. More mass was eroded as the ground rose, or even more ground rose. Movement stopped when the south side of the slightly reversed fault slammed into the north side. Note, for upward movement to occur, block faulting will produce a slightly reversed fault, not a normal fault. Consult a physical geology textbook to understand the difference between normal and reverse faults. Plateau uplift on page 222 to 223 explains the mechanics of block faulting. These discoveries, along with solid white line segment in June of 1988, convinced me that block faulting had occurred and that Echo and Vermilion Cliff had been joined along the dashed white line. Block faulting obviously occurred at several places directly north in Utah: Book Cliffs, Roan Cliffs, and Grand Staircase. The funnel also supports the presence of Grand Lake, whose shoreline was 15 to 20 miles to the north. The funnel was carved as Grand Lake reached the 2,000-foot-high Echo Vermilion Cliff. This led to the formation of Marble Canyon. Note 39. I first proposed the hydroplate theory in 1972. In 1986 and 87, after a year of study and field work in Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, I located, using geological and topographical features, the boundaries of a large, now extinct lake and named it, where did we go? Named it Grand Lake. In the fall of 1988, I described in lectures and recorded radio broadcasts on more than 100 different stations its location and how its breaching formed the Grand Canyon. This explanation for the Grand Canyon was first published in July of 1989. See Walt Brown in the Beginning, 5th edition. Phoenix, the Center for Scientific Creation, 1989, pages 75 and 76 and 83. Another extinct lake, Hopi Lake, had been described earlier. See R.B. Scarborough, Seismic Erosion and Sedimentation in Arizona, Arizona Bureau of Geology and Mineral Technology, 16 November 1984. Dr. Steve Austin of the Institute of Creation Research, ICR, as he eventually admitted in writing, purchased the 5th edition of In the Beginning in August of 1989, a few weeks after it was published. Steve Austin, Personal Correspondence, 29 August 1984. In early 1990, Austin published, as if they were his, some key ideas of mine concerning Grand Lake and the formation of the Grand Canyon. I learned this on May 7th, 1990, but said nothing to anyone about it for 3 years. On November 4th, 1990, 2 people told me that Austin on the previous day had publicly said that I had taken those ideas from him. Again, I kept silence. By mid-June 1993, I realized that Austin's false allegations against me were spreading and starting to hurt others. Austin was also the unnamed geologist mentioned in EndNotes 138 on page 196. For example, in September 1992, Dr. Robert Gentry filmed me at the Grand Canyon presenting the Grand Lake explanation as part of a professional and very expensive video production. Then on June 10th, 1993, Gentry told me that Dr. D. Russell Humphreys, who had worked closely with Austin and was then at ICR, was reporting that I had plagiarized ideas of Austin's. Humphreys later wrote that he did not use the word plagiarism, but Gentry insists that was the intended meaning. Gentry told Humphreys that he did not believe that was true, but Gentry was naturally concerned about the consequences of those allegations for his production, so he appealed to me for help. I then realized that the issue had to be addressed. By way of background, geologists have known since at least 1861 that canyons can be carved by the breaching of a dam. See Newberry, EndNote 25. The discoveries of J. Harlan Brents in 1923 have shown generations of undergraduate geology students how a breaching lake can produce canyons in weeks. In 1980, Austin and many others saw that a small lake on Mount St. Helens had breached and the escaping water had quickly carved a small canyon. In 1985, John H. Whitcomb, a student of Austin's, wondered in a term paper if the former Hopi Lake, now a dry lake bed directly east of Grand Lake, could have breached the Kaibab Plateau and carved the Grand Canyon. That would have been highly unlikely because the Kaibab Plateau is about 2,000 feet higher than the lake could have been. The water, number 2, the water would have had to penetrate 30 miles of hard rock that was denser than concrete, and 3, any spillage down such a gradual slope to the west would erode little. In 1986, Dr. Edwin Holroyd told Austin that if a dam were built across the Colorado River near Grand Canyon Village, a very large lake would form. This area would have included and been larger than the combination of both Hopi Lake and what I later identified as Grand Lake. Holroyd drew his big lake on a map and noted that some believe that if a very long east-west fault had been developed between what are now north and south rims of the Grand Canyon, the lake's escaping water might have carved the Grand Canyon. However, such an east-west fault has never been found, and the faults in the Grand Canyon region typically run perpendicular to the canyon, not parallel. Furthermore, a canyon that eroded along a fault would not bend or meander as the Grand Canyon does. The work of Newberry and Brents and the idea of Whitmore and Holroyd led Austin to wonder, in a very tentative way, as his writings show, if the breaching of Hopi Lake directly east of Grand Canyon had carved the Grand Canyon. Austin knew the serious problems mentioned above that faced any proposal suggesting that the Grand Canyon was carved by the breaching of Hopi Lake. What he did not realize, as his writings revealed, was that a much larger and separate post-flood lake was north of Hopi Lake. Austin would not produce any spoken or written records showing that he knew before 1989 anything about Grand Lake. And yet in 1990, he published a map shockingly similar to the one I had published in 1989, showing, as he labeled it, Grand Lake. In 1988, I had discovered not only the boundaries of Grand Lake, but also its breach point. When Grand Lake breached, the escaping torrent of water quickly caused the breaching of the northwest end of Hopi Lake as well. Both breach points are easily seen at the extreme north and south ends of Marble Canyon. I call the north breach point, where Grand Lake spilled, the funnel. It is shown on page 218 to 223. The south breach point, where Hopi Lake spilled, is marked by the unique terrain where the Little Colorado River enters the Colorado River. After both lakes breached, the escaping water carved the Grand Canyon in weeks and lifted upward the Kaibab Plateau. This chapter presents 24 other features which I gathered over a year's time, 1988 to 1989, that supported Grand Lake's explanation. So let's take a look on page 218 to 223. The way you can get this is you can go into hpt.rsr.org, and there's a PDF. And you can just do that, and you can search, let's search Marble Canyon. Maybe that'll get us close. Let's see what it finds us. And you do that by Command F. Ooh, look at those lakes. There you go. Yeah, so he's talking about, here's Marble Canyon. Where's the funnel? Yeah, there's the funnel in that circle. Wipes off all that sediment, 2,000 feet of sediment, so that Kaibab limestone bulges because there's nothing pushing down on it, bulges and cracks, and then this water gushes through that crack, Marble Canyon, and then it undercuts Hopi Lake, which is 250 feet higher than Grand Lake. This is at 5950, and then all that water just catastrophically sheet erodes everything on the Kaibab limestone, except for Red Butte and Cedar Mountain. Those are 900 feet over 1,000 feet of Mesozoic sediment, and you see those when you're driving up from Phoenix, and then you see one at Desert Tower too. So that used to be everywhere, and so then it sheet erodes everything. And Grand Canyon, yeah, let's take a look at that. Yeah, that's, what are we talking about here? This is the funnel that he's talking about right here, the funnel. This is Grand Lake. Grand Lake, let's see, can we go up here? Grand Lake is huge, 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 twice the size of Lake Michigan in area and volume. And if you were in Farmington, New Mexico, it would be 350 feet deep. If you were up in Grand Junction, Colorado, it would be 1,100 feet deep. And if you were in Page, Arizona, it'd be 1,400 feet deep. And Hopi Lake is about 900 to 1,000 feet deep here. And also this petrified forest is a direct result of these lakes cooling off, the silica coming out of the lake and going into the wood, petrifying the wood. That's why it's so colorful. Okay, so now let's zoom in here. Okay, so there's the funnel. It cuts down and then it hits the hard Kaibab limestone and spreads out. This is 18 miles long, 12 miles wide, and then it bulges and cracks. The water runs through the crack, and it makes Marble Canyon, and it undercuts Hopi Lake right here. So then everything bulges, it wipes, sheets, erodes everything off of here, and so now there's nothing pushing down on the Kaibab Plateau. So that whole, not only does the limestone bulge, that whole plateau upwarps, and then it bulges and cracks. Then the water that was sheet eroding everything gushes through the crack of the Grand Canyon, and now there's nothing pushing down after removing 800 cubic miles. There's nothing pushing down on this inner gorge. So now the basement rock bulges and cracks. So that's how you get Grand Canyon bulging and cracking 3 times. And where'd all the water go? It's on a huge floodplain. Huge floodplain going down to the Gulf of California, 100 miles on each side of the Colorado River. Okay, so that's a nice detour. Let's go back to this one. And again, you get that at, if you want that, that's at hbt.rsr.org. And that's how you can get it for free, because Walt Brown wasn't about making money. He was about getting the information out there. Okay, so let's move on. The chapter, the hydroplate theory, an overview on page 111 to 150, and the chapters on liquefaction, 193 to 208, and limestone fit together other necessary pieces of the puzzle. What produced all the sediment? What layered the strata and sorted the fossils? Excuse me. What had come from my work? Whoa. Did I do that right? Maybe. Yeah, I think so. Let's move over. Okay, yeah, let's do it this way. Yep. What cemented the rocks so uniformly? Why does the Grand Canyon expose so much limestone? And what were the forces, energies, and mechanisms that lifted the Rocky Mountains and raised the Colorado Plateau so high? Today's Grand Canyon would not exist if the Colorado River had not first risen more than a mile. Today's Grand Canyon would not exist if the Colorado Plateau had not first risen more than a mile above sea level. If the Grand Canyon is a consequence of a global flood, where did all the flood water come from? And where did it go afterwards? Any attempt to explain the Grand Canyon without answering these broader questions is shallow at best. And of course, any explanation that is not accompanied by definite predictions is hollow. After pondering, yeah, this is important. Yeah. Okay, let's read that again. And of course, any explanation that is not accompanied by definite predictions is hollow. Okay, after pondering Bob Gentry's appeal for me to respond to Humphrey's allegations, I realized I needed to go to the source and address these spreading accusations. If I had simply been seeking priority over a lake's name, as some have implied, I would have done so years earlier. So on June 18th, 1993, I wrote Austin explaining the seriousness of the matter and asked if these stories I had heard were true. The same day, I also wrote ICR's director, Dr. Henry Morris, now deceased, to inform him of this issue, Dr. Henry M. Morris. In all, Morris, Austin, and I exchanged 6 letters during the summer of 1993, and Austin always denied that he had accused me of plagiarism, although I explained how he could contact the witnesses who heard him and were shocked by what he had said. He never contacted those witnesses. He also denied taking any ideas of mine, although some of the new details I had published were so specific that they obviously had to come from my work. Map makers usually place on their maps tiny, unique details, even intentional errors, so that anyone who copies the map will be clearly shown to be guilty of copyright infringement. Austin tried in several deceptive ways to show that he had come up with the Grand Lake explanation first. All were easily shown to be false, as a reading of our correspondence clearly shows. By August 19th, 1993, it was clear that we would not be able to resolve this issue ourselves, so I proposed in a letter to Morris and Austin that we put the messy matter into the hands of an independent Christian arbitrator to thoroughly study and resolve. Morris and Austin flatly refused. Denials and bobbing and weaving continued. Finally, after we had exchanged 13 more letters, I told Morris and Austin that if they did not allow the matter to be arbitrated so it would not create further dissension and confusion, and so that behind the scenes accusations against me and my associates would cease, I would make the issue public. They reluctantly agreed. In various ways, Morris and Austin thwarted all efforts to seek arbitration. For example, after consulting their lawyer, and only 4 days before the arbitration was to take place, they backed out of their written agreement to arbitrate and announced that they would participate only in non-binding mediation. Arbitration is binding. After months of effort and having finally reached agreement on the time, place, and arbitrator, I felt betrayed. With plane tickets purchased and all the preparations in place, I decided to proceed anyway, hoping mediation would produce an agreement. The mediation occurred on June 21st, 1994. However, by September 28, 1994, Austin had clearly broken the agreement we signed at the mediation, as a reading of our correspondence will show. I also wrote everyone involved that Austin had broken the agreement. As of this writing, 2008, misinformation is still coming out of ICR. Therefore, to answer questions from those hearings, this misinformation and entire matter will be placed on the table for anyone to examine. People can reach their own conclusions. Notice I followed the procedure laid out in Matthew 18, 15 to 17. First, privately speak to the party you believe acted wrongly. Second, if he denies the allegations, present one or two witnesses to verify these allegations. Third, if that does not produce change, tell the church. I am now telling the church, the body of believers, anyone wishing to receive a free DVD, free CD-ROM containing all correspondence in writing or writings can simply mail or a stamped or self-addressed CD mailer containing a blank CD-ROM and case to that address. Some may wonder why Austin and I never worked together. My first attempt toward that end was in the summer of 1976. I flew to ICR in San Diego, in part to meet a Stuart E. Nevins. At the time, I did not know that Austin had been writing under that fictitious name to conceal his identity as a creationist. At lunch with Henry Morris, I said that I would like to meet Stuart Nevins. Morris, hiding the true situation, simply said that Nevins was out of town. In 1980, I flew to ICR for a series of meetings with its leadership. In an informal gathering, a person asked me to explain the hydroplate theory to those standing around. I declined, saying that I would not explain it in the brief time available. I could not explain it in the brief time available. The group urged me to do so anyway, and I again declined. Austin then walked in and also urged me to explain it, saying that he knew all the ideas about the flood and would quickly recognize what I had in mind. I began, but had completed only a few sentences when Austin interrupted to tell the group a related story. A minute or two later, he stopped talking and excused himself to catch the ride. Our gathering dispersed. In March of 1981, an acquaintance of Austin's had just attended a full-day seminar I had conducted in Chicago. Afterward, he called Austin and urged him to learn about the hydroplate theory. Austin's response was simply, "I wish those non-geologists would stay out of our business." Later, on 2 occasions, I related this to Austin, but heard no denial or retraction, only silence. Since 1984, false comments, derogatory letters, and negative innuendos about me have periodically come from ICR. Most recently, ICR has written that the hydroplate theory is laughable. The specifics of these comments show the writers have not read the theory. And again, this is from 2008. Okay. On several occasions, I have offered to debate the scientific merits of our respective understanding of the flood, but ICR always declines. One simple, quick format is explained in what is the direct oral and written refereed exchange on page 551. 40. Most authoritative sources for okay, this is his footnotes. Okay, you can check that out on your own time. Yeah, okay, all right. Prediction 18, a very deep vertical fault lies beneath the steepest slope in the East Kaibab monocline. Non-stratified sediments will be found to be on the down-throw side of the fault. Those sediments washed in to fill the void immediately after the fault formed. The edge of the uplifted block will be found to have significantly cut into the draped layer directly above. And he's got 58 of these predictions. And I think there's was it Bill Wells? No, Fred McNabb, I think. Yeah, Fred McNabb, he's found evidence that confirms 19 or 20 of them. Okay. And this is, yeah, the controversy. I think we've read this one already. But yeah, you can see all this. This is, I think we read it. Okay. Oh, maybe not. Publication from Walt Brown's 9th edition. Yeah, I think we did read this. I think it's called the Plagiarism Controversy by Walt Brown. Let's see what we got here. So let's hit some of the highlights here. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive, Sir Walter Scott. All documents, background material, and correspondence between the parties in this controversy are available for anyone to read. Others have read, studied, and reported on it. You can hear one of the clearest and most complete reports in a radio broadcast at kgov.com, the initial conditions that preceded the Grand Canyon. If anyone feels this unpleasant situation should be resolved and can set up a videotaped face-to-face meeting with all parties, I will, if physically possible, fully participate. Oh, this is different than what I read before. At least that section is. So we'll keep going. This might be from the 7th edition, possibly. In 1972, I proposed the hydroplate theory after a year of study and fieldwork in Arizona, Utah, Colorado in 1986 to 87. I located, using geological and topographical features, a basin that once held an enormous lake. I named it Grand Lake. Beginning in my fall of 1988 seminars in United States and Canada, on a September 16th, 1988 radio broadcast over 200 stations, I described Grand Lake's key features, locations, and how its breaching formed the Grand Canyon in weeks. I first published this explanation for Grand Canyon in July of 1989. Another extinct lake, Hopi Lake, was described earlier by R.B. Scarborough. Dr. Steve Austin, then at the Institute of Creation Research, ICR, finally admitted that he purchased my 1989 fifth edition of In the Beginning in August of 1989, weeks after it was published. In early 1990, Austin published, as if they were his, essential ideas of mine about Grand Lake and the formation of Grand Canyon, and also claimed he discovered Grand Lake. I learned this on May 7th, 1990, but said nothing about it for 3 years. On November 4th, 1990, two people, initials JB and DB, told me that Austin, on the previous day, said in a large public presentation that I took those critical ideas from him. Again, I kept silence. By mid-June 1993, Austin's false allegations against me were spreading to the broad audience connected to ICR and starting to harm others. For example, in September of 1992, a television crew hired by Dr. Robert Gentry filmed me at the Grand Canyon presenting the Grand Lake explanation as part of an expensive television production. Then on June 10th, 1993, Gentry called to tell me that Dr. Russell Humphreys, who had worked closely with Austin and was then at ICR, was reporting that I had plagiarized Austin's ideas. Humphreys' letter wrote that he did not use the word plagiarize, but Gentry insists that was the intended meaning. Gentry told Humphreys that he did not believe that was true, but was naturally concerned about the consequences of those allegations for his costly film production, so he appealed to me for help. I then recognized I had to address the issue, even though I knew it would anger ICR, the largest, most well-known and popular creationist organization at the time, plus many of its followers, and its leader, the father of the creation movement, Henry Morris Jr. By way of background, geologists have known since at least 1861 that canyons can be catastrophically carved in weeks by water suddenly released by the breaching of a lake's boundary. The discoveries of J. Harlan Brents in 1923 also showed this to a generation of undergraduate geology students. In 1980, Austin and many others saw that a small lake on Mount St. Helens had breached, and the escaping water quickly carved a tiny canyon. In 1985, John H. Whitcomb, a student of Austin's, wondered in a term paper if the former Hopi Lake, now a dry lake basin directly east of the Grand Canyon, could have breached the Kaibab Plateau and carved the Grand Canyon. That would have been highly unlikely because, one, the Kaibab Plateau is 2,000 feet higher than Hopi Lake could have been. Two, the water could not penetrate 30 miles through the Kaibab Plateau, hard rock that was denser than concrete. And three, any spillage down such a gradual slope to the west would erode little material. In 1986, Dr. Edmund Holroyd told Austin that if a dam that was larger than the largest dam in the world blocked the Colorado River near Grand Canyon Village, a vast lake larger than Hopi Lake and Grand Lake combined would form. Holroyd drew this hypothetical lake on a map and noted that if a very long east-west fault that had developed between what is now the north and south rims of the Grand Canyon, the lake's escaping water might have carved the Grand Canyon. However, no one has found such an east-west fault, and faults in the Grand Canyon region are typically perpendicular to the canyon, not parallel. Furthermore, a canyon that eroded along a fault would not bend or meander as the Grand Canyon does. The discoveries of Newberry and Bretz and the speculation of Whitmore and Holroyd led Austin to wonder, in a very tentative way, as his writings show, if the breaching of Hopi Lake directly east of the Grand Canyon had carved the Grand Canyon. Austin probably knew the sphere problems mentioned above that faced any proposal that the breaching Hopi Lake carved the Grand Canyon. What Austin did not realize, as his writings expressed, was that a much larger and separate post-flood lake, Grand Lake, was north of Hopi Lake. Despite my repeated written requests, Austin was unable to produce any spoken or written record showing that he knew before 1989 anything about Grand Lake. However, in 1990, Austin published a map shockingly similar to the one I had published in 1989, showing that, as he labeled it, Grand Lake, and giving it its elevation 5,700 feet above sea level, just as I had announced in many forums a year earlier in 1988 and published in 1989, along with the boundaries, elevation, and breach point of Grand Lake. When Grand Lake breached, the escaping water also breached the northwest corner of Hopi Lake. The two obvious breach points define the north and south ends of Marble Canyon and explain many of its unusual characteristics described in the chapter. I call the northern breach point, where Grand Lake spilled, the funnel. The south breach point, where Hopi Lake spilled, is marked by the unique terrain where the Little Colorado River enters the Colorado River. The near simultaneous breaching of both lakes catastrophically carved the Grand Canyon in weeks and upwarded the Kaibab Plateau via the water balloon effect, explained on page 227. A torrent of water then can cut down through the rising Kaibab Plateau. This chapter presents 24 other points of evidence I gathered in 1986 and 87 that confirm the Grand Canyon explanation. Let's see if we can find the water balloon effect. It's when you squeeze a water balloon. Water balloon, is it in here? There it is. Let's go find it. Okay, bulge and squeeze like the water balloon. Let's see if we can see that picture. Okay, I've seen the picture before. Okay, that's the only place. Oh, it is listed somewhere else. Is this where it's listed? Okay, must be this last one. Okay. Well, I don't see the picture, but we'll read about it. If you squeeze a fist-sized water balloon with both hands, you will notice that a slight increase in pressure in one side of the balloon quickly creates a bulge on another side. Likewise, shifts of weight from the left block to the right block and acted quickly on the magma and water-saturated sediments produce a bulge or upward. It would become the Kaibab Plateau. So bulging and cracking. That's the key to Grand Canyon, bulging and cracking. So no picture of the water balloon. Oh, interesting. Okay, back to where we were. Okay. Oh, gathered, confirmed that. Okay, the chapters, the hydroplate theory and overview, pages, whatever, liquefaction and limestone fit together the other essential pieces of the puzzle. What produced all the sediment, layered the strata, and sorted the fossils? What cemented the rocks so uniformly? Why does the Grand Canyon expose so much limestone? How was limestone produced? What raised the Colorado Plateau? And how could the Colorado River flow through the Kaibab Plateau? What forces, energy, and mechanisms buckled the Colorado Mountains? The Grand Canyon would not exist if the Colorado Plateau had not first rapidly risen more than a mile above sea level and lifted two large lakes. Lakes rarely form at such high elevations where rainfall is rare and evaporation is rapid. So yeah, you can explain all those with the hydroplate theory. And that's why we're doing this. We want people to be exposed to the hydroplate theory. Oh, it continues. Lucky us. If the Grand Canyon is a consequence of a global flood, where did all the flood water come from, and where did all the dirt and water go? Centuries after the flood, was there enough water to transport 2,800 cubic miles of dirt? Any attempt to explain Grand Canyon without first answering these broader questions is incomplete. Of course, any explanation that is not accompanied by published predictions is weak science. Let's read that again. Any explanation that is not accompanied by published predictions is weak science. The breach dam explanation requires the hydroplate theory to explain many critical details that Austin's writings never addressed. After pondering Gentry's appeal for me to respond to Humphrey's false allegations, I realized I needed to go to the source of these spreading accusations, that I stole Austin's ideas. If I had simply been seeking priority, as some have alleged, I would have done so years earlier. So on June 18th, 1993, I wrote Austin explaining the seriousness of the matter and asked if it was true that he had made those accusations against me. The same day, I also wrote ICR's director, Dr. Henry M. Morris, now deceased, to inform him of this issue. In all, Morris and I had exchanged 6 letters during the summer of 1993. Austin always denied accusing me of plagiarism. And you can hear this. This is on a talk. What was it? What do we call that? Setting the Record Straight. You'll be able to see these. You can read it. It's called Setting the Record Straight by Dr. Walt Brown. And you can hear that we read these letters. We read 5 of them. I can't find the 6th one, but we'll see if we can find it, see how they respond to it. But anyway, I attached 6 letters during the summer of 1993. Austin always denied accusing me of plagiarism, intellectual theft, although I explained how he could contact those who clearly recalled Austin making those accusations. Austin never contacted those witnesses. He also denied taking any ideas of mine, although some details he published were so specific that they obviously came from my work. With each attempt to evade, he created more problems for himself and left his fingerprints. Okay, fingerprints. What are you guys seeing? Am I staring? Yeah, I'm sharing that. Okay, so you should be seeing this. Map makers usually place tiny, unique details on their maps, even intentional errors, so that copyright infringements will be easy to prove if anyone copies, sells, or claims ownership of the map. Austin tried in several deceptive ways to show that he had come up with the Grand Lake explanation first. They were easily shown to be false, as a reading of all our correspondence clearly shows. For example, Austin backdated his 1989 guidebook by 1 year, giving it a false 1988 copyright date. This is easily seen by the date on the book's cover and later dates in those pages. By 1991, Austin must have realized plagiarism and copyright infringement were shown by his using the name Grand Lake on a map of his guidebook he sold. He then changed his name for the lake to Canyonlands Lake, having 2 names for a gigantic lake responsible for the formation of the Grand Canyon will continue to produce confusion and prevent others from going to the source for the evidence and full explanation for Grand Canyon's origin. In August 19, 1993, I proposed in a letter to Morris and Austin that we should put this unpleasant matter in the hands of an independent Christian arbitrator to thoroughly study and resolve, because we were unable to resolve it ourselves. Morris and Austin flatly refused. Denials and bobbing and weaving continued. Finally, after exchanging 13 more letters, I told Morris and Austin that if they did not allow an independent arbitrator to resolve this matter, so it would not create further discord, confusion, and accusations against my associates and me, I would make the issue public. They reluctantly agreed, but in various ways thwarted all efforts to seek arbitration. For example, after consulting their lawyer, and only 4 days before the arbitration was to occur, they backed out of their written agreement to arbitrate and announced that they would participate only in non-binding mediation. Arbitration is binding. After months of effort and finally reached an agreement on the time, place, and arbitrator, I felt betrayed. With plane tickets purchased and all preparations in place, I decided to proceed anyway, hoping mediation would produce an agreement. Mediation occurred on June 21st, 1994 at Pepperdine University. However, by September 28th, 1994, Austin had clearly broken the agreement we signed at the mediation, as a reading of our correspondence will show. I then wrote everyone involved, including Henry Morris and each member of the ICR's board of directors, that Austin had broken the agreement. Misinformation is still spreading. Therefore, to answer questions from those hearings, this misinformation, the entire matter will be placed on the table for anyone to examine. People can reach their own conclusions. To resolve the matter, I followed the procedure. To follow the matter, I followed the procedure laid out in Matthew 18:15-17. First, privately speak to the party you believe acted wrongly. Second, if he disagrees, present one or two witnesses to verify your allegations. Third, if that does not produce change, tell the church. I am now telling the church, the body of believers. Some have asked why Austin and I never worked together. My first attempt toward that end was in the summer of 1976. I flew to ICR in San Diego in part to meet Stuart E. Nevins. At the time, I did not know that Austin had been writing under that fictitious name to conceal from evolutionists and the academic community that he was a creationist. At lunch with Henry Morris, I said that I would like to meet Stuart Nevins. Morris, hiding the true situation, simply said Nevins was out of town. In 1980, I flew to San Diego for a series of meetings with ICR leadership. In an informal gathering, someone asked me to explain the hydroplate theory to the group. I declined, saying I could not explain it in the brief time available. Apparently, Austin was listening in the next room and may have planted that question because he picked up on the conversation where it had been seconds earlier, walked in and urged me in stronger terms to explain the hydroplate theory, saying that he knew all the ideas about the flood and would quickly recognize what I had in mind. I began, but completed only a few sentences when Austin interrupted to tell the group an unrelated story. A minute later, he excused himself to catch his ride home. Our gathering then dispersed. In March 1981, a friend of Austin's, initials TM, had just attended the first of 200 full-day seminars I conducted between 1981 and 1999 in the United States and Canada. He called Austin to urge him to learn about the hydroplate theory. Austin's response was simply, "I wish those non-geologists would stay out of our business." Later, twice I related this to Austin in face-to-face conversations, but heard no denial or retraction, only silence and a blank deer-in-the-headlights stare. Since 1984, false comments, derogatory letters, and negative innuendos about me have periodically come from ICR. Most recently, some at ICR have written that the hydroplate theory is laughable. The specifics of these comments show that they had not read the theory. On several occasions, I offered to debate the scientific merits of our respective understandings of the flood. We could follow the simple format explained on page 571. What is the direct and oral and written refereed exchange? ICR always declines. Okay, and then this is the timeline. We read that one already. So that's what we have here, folks. This is the can of worms again. Nobody wants to answer. And let's see, as long as we're here, again, you can get this at Calvary PO and search, what did we search? Calvary PO, a summary. Yeah, summary of Grand Canyon, I think is what we got here. Okay, so you can read that for yourself. Yeah, Grand Canyon Summary, calvarypo.org, and then search Grand Canyon Summary, and you can see that. And that's what Walt Brown had written. And there's another character to get into this, but as long as we're here, I think you might find this interesting too. Let's search Ord. This is fascinating, I think. Okay, all right, what are we seeing here? Okay, let's move on. That's not it. That's not it. Here we go. Nope. Oh, maybe I'm spelling it wrong. Anyhow, there was a Grand Canyon tour. Leave early. Let's search 3 days. See if we can find it that way. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're trying to find. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. All right. Okay. Where are we at here? Yeah, what are we looking at? Okay. He's talking about frozen mammoths. Okay, that's not what we want to talk about. Okay, here we go. Number 9. And this is on, what page are we on? It's 572 of 640, but this is on page This is an endnote page, references, page 564. I thought this was pretty interesting. This is the DVD that you can, or the PDF. Let me see, I better plug this in before it goes dead. Don't want it to go dead right now. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Michael Ord has proposed that the Grand Canyon formed as the floodwaters drained from the earth. On February 1st, 2006, he wrote and asked me to show him the evidence that supported my explanation for Grand Canyon, since published on pages 215 to 257. I was confident that he would not be able to find some of the remote locations to see the evidence for himself, nor would I be present to answer the objections Ort had been raising publicly. So I offered to take him to the actual locations if a mutual friend of ours, senior biologist Brent Carter, would organize a trip of at least 7 geologists to accompany us. Each geologist was to read beforehand the hydroplate theory and Ord's theory. On the field trip, Ord and I would each take 3 days to show the group our evidence. Both Ord and our friend agreed, and the group of 7 geologists was formed. We met at the Grand Canyon on July 17, 2006. For the first 3 days, I took the group to many of the formations shown on pages 215 to 257. The 4th day, when it was Ort's turn to show us the 3 days of evidence he promised, he announced that he had none to show us. Unfortunately, our group then adjourned 3 days earlier. And then apparently, if I understand right, Bob Enyart talks about this on one of his radio shows. And if I understand it, well, allegedly, then Ort went on to write a critical piece on the hydroplate theory, even though he saw all the evidence. And so, again, that's an interesting tidbit. Okay, so that's probably too much information for you guys. Let's jump out of here real quick and wrap this up and put a bow on it. Again, there's a theory that's making accurate predictions, and it's being kicked to the curb by creationists and evolutionists alike. I understand why evolutionists would want to kick it to the curb because it's got biblical support, but it really is troublesome that creationists are kicking it to the curb, and they've done it for 50 years. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing this, is to shine light on it, to deal with this can of worms, and so then it can be dealt with, and then we can look at a theory that logically explains and scientifically explains 25 major features on Earth and in the solar system, makes astoundingly accurate predictions, and is validated by NASA discoveries. This is the theory that'll destroy the Big Bang, and we need to get it into the mainstream, but it's hard to do that when there's misunderstandings about Walt Brown and about the hydroplate theory. So again, this is going to be a grassroots movement. It's not going to come from the top, apparently. Well, it might. There's some leaders at the top that want to know more about the flood models. So we want to build bridges with those leaders. We want to get all the information in there. And I would encourage people to start asking about the hydroplate when you go to creation museums, when you hear creation speakers, ask them about the accurate predictions that the hydroplate has made. And let's just jump into them real quick. Okay, we're here back in this is again is at hpt.rs. Ooh, let me share my screen here. So you got that. Let's look at the accurate predictions. We're going to Command F, and this is predictions. Predictions. I think it's on page 470. Let's see. We're going to go up because it's at the end of the book. And let's make this smaller. Yeah, let's take a look at the confirmed predictions. There's 58 of them. And what was it? Like 20 of them have been confirmed. Okay, where are we at? Okay. Oh, page 470. Yeah, let's go to page 470. All right, here we go. We're going down to 470. Let's see. Can we type it in here? Not going to be there, but it'll get us close. Okay, this is 462. 470. Here are the accurate predictions that Walt Brown has made. Where is 470? Here it is, up here. What are the predictions of the hydroplate theory? Let's take a look at these. And super rotational Venus, there's been 20 of them. There's only about, let's see, 10 of them that are in bold here. but this is from 2019. Fred McNabb, he did a lot more on this. But these are the predictions of the hydroplate theory. Ask the catastrophic plate tectonics people, what are your predictions? What are your accurate ones? What are your current ones? And let's just do the ones that are bold right now. Pooled water under mountains was confirmed. Deep channels under Bosporus and Gibraltar were confirmed. Salt on Mars was confirmed because that water came from Earth in the subterranean water chambers. Asteroids are flying rock piles, which was confirmed with the DART mission. NASA made a huge blunder there. And rocks on asteroids and comets are rounded. That was confirmed with Comet 67P. How do you get rounded boulders in space? If they smash together in space, they're going to have jagged edges. The only way you get rounded boulders is if they're going through a fast flow of water, breaking off the sharp edges before they get thrown into space, propelled into space. And that's what the hydroplate theory says. Water inside large asteroids, carbon-14 in old bones. Yeah, and we do another talk on this on the accurate predictions on the channel. So again, there's a theory that logically explains 25 major features on Earth and in the solar system, and we need your help to get it into the mainstream. You know, a scientific revolution seldom occurs when the people in power, like the education and even the Christian power people, have the power. They don't want it to change. You know, they want to make, and I understand you got to make budget. You got to sell a book. You don't want a theory that's going to compromise, you know, cut into your book sales. But is that what we're here for? Are we here to sell books, or are we here to let the truth get out there? So it'll be interesting. I'm putting down a challenge. Which creation museum is going to allow us to think first about the flood models? Right now, they all got their catastrophic plate tectonics, which is only one idea. You need to see two ideas if you want to think. Otherwise, you just memorize. And Thomas Chamberlain, 100 some years ago, wrote a paper on that. So we need to, if you have two theories, you can sharpen your analytical skills. You can think, you can compare and contrast, and you can think independently. If you just have one model, you just memorize and conform. And that's what the evolutionists do. And the blind chancers, the big bangers, they just present one and people memorize and conform. We need more thinkers out there. So where I'm challenging the creation museums and discovery institutes and centers to let people think. Have an exhibit, put both models up there and put the confirmed predictions. You know, put their predictions and the confirmed predictions. If you don't have predictions, well, it's weak science. We should have strong science. And I'm encouraging the creation leaders to let people think. Set the example for the evolutionists. Put competing hypotheses out there. And I think the first museum that does that, you're going to see your donations go up because you want people to think. And this is a powerful weapon, powerful witnessing tool. And we just, you know, have a letter, you know, that we're just, you know, this is simple to rectify. Just say, we messed up in the past. There's been a wrong and we want to fix it. We want people to think so science can advance. And so that's a lot to think about. And yeah, it's sad that it's come to this and we don't enjoy doing this, but it's needed to be done. Otherwise, it's going to fall into history. And we can't let this valuable theory fade away into history. You know, Walt Brown was the Isaac Newton of our day. And to honor him, I think we should start asking questions about the hydroplate. We should start, you know, asking the flood models for predictions and just start demanding almost the opportunity to think. Let us think in your museums. Let's let you set the high bar. And again, they're fighting for second place. The Boneyards Museum in Broken Bow, Nebraska is well worth the time to get there. They've got the hydroplate theory in their museum. I don't know any other museum that does. And so now it's going to be which one's going to be first to allow people to think. Put both theories in there. Have a display of that. Predictions made, the confirmed predictions, and the biblical support. And I think that'll do a long way of helping the creation movement advance. Because right now we're in the dark ages as far as the flood models go. You can only think this certain way. And I think it's time to have an open discussion. You know, an open discussion between the CPT guys and the hydroplate guys and compare and contrast the strengths and weaknesses of each model. And we've been trying to set that up for a year. You know, we were going to do it and they just won't step up to the microphone. And so Walt Brown, he mentions that people who's witnessing the scientific revolution, just watch who avoids the scientific debate, who avoids debating their issues. And so just keep an eye on that. And so again, we want science to advance. We want the creation movement to advance. And I think we're all on the same team on that. So let's just put all the theories on the table and then promote the one that makes accurate predictions. That'd be my suggestion. But who am I? I'm just the megaphone. I'm not the scientist. So we just need more people. And you could play a key point in this, key role. So again, thank you for staying with me to the end, and we'll see if we can find out some more of those letters so you can see the mental gymnastics that corresponds, the back and forth between Walt and the other parties, and then get it all out there and let people think. And hopefully, it'll be interesting. Which creation organization is going to lead us out of the dark ages and let us think about flood models? The first organization to do that, to publicly do that, is going to have a huge feather in its hat in coming generations. So again, thanks for sticking with me this long, and hopefully things are going well. Okay, we got some comments here. What's this one? Okay, let's look at comments. Why aren't you responding? Oh, okay. Well, it's because when I'm sharing my full screen, I can't see comments. That's why I don't respond until I can get back here, and now I can look. Okay, let's see. Do we have any other ones? A lot of highs, okay, good deal. And there's some bots in there that don't like it, but that's okay. A lot of people didn't like Jesus either. So anyhow, and the people that don't like the truth, we're praying for you. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. And Satan's the father of lies. He's come to kill, steal, and destroy. And so we want all the truth to get out there, and mainly so people can put their faith in the Creator who revealed himself in the Bible, and they can read about Jesus and put their faith in him and go to heaven. Because what we have now is a theory that can't be really defended. It's just secular theory sped up with the plate tectonics model. That's not how we should do things. We should go to the Bible first. And that's what Walt Brown did. And we encourage other creation scientists to do the same. Okay, so that answered that question. Thank you for joining, everybody. Have a Merry Christmas, and may God bless your efforts in sharing the truth. Have a blessed day.